Robocraft, a game that inspires many mixed emotions at its mere mention. Some prefer to remember the good times, but many others can't forgive some of the significant changes that were made to the game. You might already know this story, but today I'm going to be talking about Robocraft 2, why you should think about giving the game a chance, and maybe even start to get a little hyped like I am. So for anyone who doesn't know, Robocraft 1 had a pretty rough journey, and towards the end it really struggled to keep people playing. There's other videos that cover this much better, so I won't go over it too much, but this is the short version. Robocraft 1 was a small indie game that ended up exploding in popularity early on. This was due to a number of factors, but the biggest contributor was probably Steam. Steam was featuring the game on their store for a while, and that really helped promote the game. It's also worth noting that this period saw a lot of sandbox building games seeing great success, like Minecraft, Roblox, and Space Engineers, to name a few. But unfortunately, that didn't translate into long-term success for Robocraft, and most people would probably place the blame for that on significant changes to the game that were very poorly received by the community. Most notably the removal of the tier system, and later on, the addition of a loot crate system. So what's Robocraft 2 like? Robocraft 2 is awesome. There's so much new stuff, I don't even know where to begin. You've got physics, active and passive joints, bots that use separate groups of cubes, sensors, plates, 1/3 grid cube placement, copy-paste and build mode, and even logic, which allows you to do some rudimentary programming. All the stuff that I wanted to do in Robocraft 1 but couldn't, I can do that in Robocraft 2, and it feels satisfying. I can finally put armor around my guns, and I can choose how it's mounted, rather than just having a fixed mounting point. When I slam into someone's robot now, it really feels like a collision, and there is collision physics. And when you combine that with moving parts, you can make things like flippers, chompers, and pincers, archetypes that didn't exist because they weren't possible in Robocraft 1. It's basically like BattleBots crossed with Twisted Metal, or crossed with Minecraft? So why should we forgive the developers? So if you're somebody who didn't like how Robocraft 1 was handled, and you're finding it hard to give the developers another chance, I know it can be hard to forgive, believe me. But I think it's important to remember that the developers are a small team who probably wasn't ready for the explosive success of Robocraft in its early days. But they learned a lot, and they've expanded their team since then. And yes, they clearly underestimated how strongly the community would feel about radical changes to the game like the progression system. And yes, it's fair to criticize them for their mistakes. So if you're feeling nervous about trying Robocraft 2 because of your experience with Robocraft 1, I get it. I think that's fair. But I think holding a grudge for this is a little bit extreme. And here's where I have to tell you all the story that you probably won't believe. But it was my experience with Robocraft 1. Believe it or not, but I joined Robocraft 1 right around the loot box era, and I actually enjoyed it. Not the loot boxes, mind you, I'm not insane, but the game itself had so much going for it that I was willing to look past the loot boxes. And then before I knew it, the loot boxes were gone, and the weapons that felt too strong were being toned down. And there was massive rebalances to the damage, energy, and module systems. Movement parts were also reworked, and eventually the game reached a pretty decent balance between all the movement types and weapons and modules. Now sure, I didn't agree with everything, and are there things that got nerfed or buffed too much in my opinion? Definitely. But I challenge you to name a game that has universal agreement on every element of its balance and design. It might not be perfect, but for such a small team and a game I enjoyed for over 750 hours, I'm not complaining. I'm probably going to get a lot of flack for saying this, but out of all the time that I played Robocraft 1, I think its current state is the best it's ever been from a game design perspective. Like, it's actually quite polished. I know, I never experienced the golden age, but I still think it says something that I joined at what most people consider to be the worst time in Robocraft 1. I was still able to enjoy it, and the game became more refined and polished from there. The sad part was just that the players had already left by the time it got there. Not that I'm trying to blame the players, I'm not blaming you guys. I'm just sad that that's how it turned out. And you know, in Free Jam's defense, they went back on some changes after they were poorly received, and they listened to feedback and reintroduced elements from the early days of Robocraft that were removed. I know, tiers aren't what they were before, Plasma Volley isn't back, and everything's so fast now. But there's not a lot of developers out there who would redesign the core progression system of their game a second time because the players weren't happy with it. And their responsiveness to feedback should be recognized, even if they aren't willing to listen on everything. They were making their game after all, and we should expect them to take some creative license. There's a lot of ways to make a great game, but everyone has their own idea of what would make a game their favorite game. I think, and this is just my guess, but maybe they wanted to aim for something along the lines of Rocket League in terms of pace of action. But for a lot of people, this was too far removed from their earlier experiences with the game. And people might not agree with this, but if anything led to the demise of Robocraft 1, I think it was that disconnect between what the devs wanted the game to be and what the players saw when they first tried it. So why should we be hyped for Robocraft 2? So if you're still watching at this point, you're probably thinking, yeah, okay, guy on the internet I've never heard of before. Sure, it's technically possible they make another game I'll love, but there's no way I'm getting excited for it. Well, why not? Why not get a little excited over the possibility of Robocraft 2 being great? There's so many new possible builds and mechanics to explore, and it's not like you need to commit to playing it if you don't like it. I think Robocraft 2 has the potential to be a genuine classic. The dev team is passionate about the game, there's an insane amount of replay value, the aesthetic look of the game was already refined in Robocraft 1, and they've learned a lot about balance and design from their experience on Robocraft 1 as well. To me, that's a much more promising scenario than most of the soulless AAA releases that are made by devs who've been in the industry so long that they've stopped innovating or being creative. I'll put it as simply as I can. If you can't forgive Free Jam for making a game that you loved and then ruining it, you're only punishing yourself. You might end up loving Robocraft 2 if you gave it a shot. You might not. And since it's free, what do you really have to lose? Your pride about being right on the internet? And if the game changes and you don't like it anymore, you know, that might be frustrating, but it doesn't take away those memories of the times you enjoyed. Outro.
Hey, fine, where do I get it?
Now this is going to be an early access release, so if that sounds like something you wouldn't be interested in, feel free to wait. But if you're really feeling the hype like I am, and you just can't wait to try it, then you can get the game on Steam, or you can download it on their website, robocraft2.com. I've been playing for a couple months now, and I'm really having a blast building things, seeing people's cool designs, capping towers with lasers, lobbing plasma at the powerful Robocraft, and turning starter boss into piles of Legos with the railgun. I've started streaming it recently too, because this game is just so much fun with friends. Anyway, that's about all I have to say for now. Hopefully I convinced a few people, and maybe I'll see some of you out there. And if you run into this, and you're hyped for Robocraft 2, then climb on board! Thanks for watching, really. This took quite a bit of work to put together, so I really do appreciate it. And please, share this if you're hyped for Robocraft 2. I really want this game to be successful, but that can only happen if people are willing to give it a chance, so please, if you were feeling nervous about trying Robocraft 2 and I helped change your mind, share this with somebody.